What is in the water? People all over the state are asking that tonight after getting their mail. Over the last several months, cities and towns have been sending warnings to residents, telling them that their water has levels of chemicals known as PFAS.
So, of course, these letters are alarming. They're also confusing. If you got one of these letters, you probably have some questions. WBZ's Zinnia Maldonado went out in search of some answers.
The town of Danvers shut down one of their backup water supply wells due to elevated levels of PFAS. It's an issue communities across the state are dealing with after they became required by the Department of Environmental Protection to begin testing for the chemical.
Our water supply sources have tested for it, and it's hard to kind of describe where exactly it's coming from.
Danvers town engineer Stephen King says his team is in the process of creating a filtration plant for one of the town's wells that tested above the state's maximum concentration level for PFAS, 20 parts per trillion.
We're doing our parts to make sure that we're watching our source water supplies, we're trying to protect them, and making sure that this isn't going to affect our water users.
You've got to let residents know, you've got to potentially treat that water, find an alternate source.
Clean Water Action says PFAS has been prevalent in drinking water for years, but dozens of cities and towns are now addressing the issue because they've been required to test for it after statewide PFAS regulations took effect last year.
And part of that phase is just discovering the scope of the problem, and that's where we're at right now.
PFAS, which are often called the forever chemicals, come from things like firefighting foam, nonstick food cookware, and food containers with nonstick surfaces, and from industrial sources. When ingested, it can lead to problems with low infant birth weights, adverse effects on your immune system, and cancer.
Health directors across the Commonwealth are trying to figure out, how best they can advise the residents in those communities where PFAS are a problem.
The health director in Hopkinton, a town that has also seen elevated levels of PFAS, says residents have to understand there's still a lot of unknowns surrounding the chemical, but majority of issues tend to affect children and expecting mothers.
Those are probably the highest risk group. So we should start having conversations about how do we reduce the exposure in that population.
And a legislative task force here in Massachusetts set to study PFAS is gearing up to release a final report on the negative health effects the chemical has on residents. In Middleton, Zinnia Maldonado, WBZ News.